Christie, why don't you start by telling us what it is about Phantasticus that you like and how you got into geckos and Phantasticus specifically?
So I started out with geckos, gosh, I guess about 12 years ago. I got into it kind of randomly. I went to an expo and ended up talking with one of the vendors for almost 2 hours. I felt a little bad about monopolizing his table space. But I learned a lot about the geckos that he had with him, and he ended up offering me a job.
Really?
Yes. So that was really exciting. Ended up traveling all over the East Coast.
Had you been keeping reptiles at this point?
No, I was interested in them.
So complete newbie, never kept a reptile, and you're offered a job.
I was offered a job. I don't know what he saw, but he decided that I was willing to learn. So he brought me on, and I never regretted it. I learned so much.
So what geckos brought you to that table in the first place?
Crested geckos, one of the most common species in the hobby.
And a great species.
Oh, they're fantastic. They really are. They're a lot of fun to keep, and a fairly simple care animal, and you can handle them, play with them, do stuff with them, and they caught my eye.
So let's focus a little bit on Uroplatus specifically. You know, it's a wonderful genus. Plenty of beautiful animals. What species are you currently keeping?
So I'm currently keeping Phantasticus as well as Fimbriatus, Guntheri, and I do have some Fiera in there, Peachmoney.
So a real variety of animals.
Yeah, I really like keeping a variety. I find something interesting about all of them, so it's...
Not to mention a size variety. I mean,
huge size variety.
Yeah, Fimbriatus. I've seen Fimbriatus in Madagascar, and they're literally this big.
Yeah, my largest is a female, and she's a good about 1 foot long. She's amazing.
Wow.
So
I could come up with a million questions to ask you about Fimbriatus, but we're going to stay on topic here with Phantasticus. So okay, so you went to the show, you approached this gentleman. Crested geckos is what brought you there. But how long did it take you before you learned about Uroplatus and got into Uroplatus?
So within the first year of working for him, I saw my first Sakura and fell in love with them. Thought they were just absolutely amazing. So I had my first pair within a year of getting involved in geckos. I successfully produced those right out of the gate, which I had no idea at the time, but apparently was somewhat of a feat.
I would say so. So you got eggs out of those two.
I did. I successfully produced those, had some really amazing babies. And then I got looking more into the genus and discovered Phantasticus. And as soon as you see a picture of Phantasticus, it's pretty much over from there.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
They're such a unique and beautiful animal. There's nothing else like them out there. And I was immediately drawn to them. I got my first pair that were wild caught, and unfortunately my temperatures were not quite right for them.
So too high, I'm assuming?
Yes, they were too high, and unfortunately I just did not do well with my first pair, and I lost them both. And they were wild caught. I didn't know enough about them. It was one of those things I regretted.
A summer accident.
Yeah, I was living in an apartment at the time. Top floor, old building, terrible air conditioning. So,
and that one day the power goes out or the air conditioning fails when it comes to sensitive species like this. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, and hopefully when we speak about husbandry later, we can touch on that and about just how critical temperature is to this genus.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very important part of keeping them. So.
Okay, so you started with Sakura and quickly gravitated to Phantasticus. So why don't you tell us about your first Phantasticus pair, or did you get more than two?
So the first pair, unfortunately, that I lost, that was just a single pair. But then I moved into a house not too long after that, had a basement and much more temperature appropriate setup for them.
Yes.
And that's when I really dove in. And when I say dove in, I went off the deep end. I started with one pair, but that lasted for, I think, 2 weeks before I had 3 more pairs come in. So,
what year was this?
Oh, had to have been about 7 years ago.
Okay, so at this point, Madagascar was still bringing in Phantasticus and other Uroplatus, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So wild caught is somewhat available. Would you, at that time, did you find many breeders?
Very few, very few. It was very challenging to find captive bred animals at that point, and most of mine were wild caught.
Okay.
I only knew of one captive bred breeder that I would see at the Chicago show.
And he would actually be selling offspring.
Yeah, he would, but
so
he was the only one I knew
enough.
of.
Yeah, I mean, even today, to find a breeder that's willing to let go of offspring is pretty hard.
It is a challenge. It's
Yeah.
a very big challenge. And often when they do let them go, they're pretty picky about where they end up because
As they should be.
so much work goes into them.
And I'll have to say, just from my experience with Phantasticus, as you brought up, I mean, one mistake and you can lose an animal, and they do not give you, some animals will show you that they're stressed or that they're sick, and with Phantasticus, I gotta say, I've seen no indication that an animal is gonna die, ever.
Same.
Ever.
It's very rare you see anything wrong with them before you lose them.
You just come in and it is literally a deceased animal, and it's a
And
tragic,
it's
heartbreaking
heartbreaking.
experience.
It is absolutely heartbreaking. It never stops being heartbreaking no matter how long you work with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Why don't we take the time to transition into the husbandry of Phantasticus? The good thing about Phantasticus is that husbandry is not necessarily difficult, but I would say that we would probably both agree that it is, while not difficult,
it's specific.
You do not stray from it.
Yes, it's very specific.
Yeah.
Once you have everything set up properly, really, it's not complicated to keep them. It's just making sure you have everything in the parameters that are essential for their survival and well-being.
Yeah, and that you're able to consistently provide those.
Yes.
You know, one weekend away and an air conditioning malfunctioning, or you have a guest that is at your house and they're like, well, they probably don't want me to turn the AC on while I go to dinner, and they turn it off. That's it.
That's all it takes. That's really all it takes.
So Christy, at this point, you've got your Phantasticus. What's your collection up to right now?
I try not to count because that way when my husband asks me, I can't tell him. But I would guess I probably have about 40 that are adult breeding animals, and then numerous offspring from
Of
them.
all your animals, or
No,
Phantasticus
that's
alone?
just Phantasticus.
Oh my gosh.
Overall, I have around, I would say about 200 animals right now.
It's amazing.
It varies greatly depending on the time of season.
It does, it does. And it seems like a large number of animals, but when you've been keeping for as long as we have,
it stops seeming like as much.
Yeah, you get there pretty quick. And like you said, there are certainly times of the year where you're well over those numbers.
Yes, summertime being a high-end one, less shows, no shipping.
Absolutely. I wanted to thank you for having this chat, and we will resume next time with a discussion about the husbandry of Phantasticus. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook as well under leap.habitats. Take care.